Honey, and welcome back to another episode of the Italian American Podcast. I'm John Viola, along with my partner in crime, the notorious P.O.B. Patrick O'Boyle. We are coming to you once again from the corner of Mulberry and Grand and the heart of Little Italy here in New York City. Red Sauce Studio is our home, and we are very excited by the prospect of, I think, an important conversation today. We've got a guest who came to my attention through Pat, her and her partner, and their business all the way from Boulder, Colorado. Roz Maiorino is from Bespoke Italian Citizenship. And you may be asking yourself, haven't we had conversations about Italian citizenship before in the process? And yes, that's true. But the beauty of today...
About German citizenship?
We certainly could, I'm
cameras
sure.
Are getting worse here
He's
now.
getting hot under the lights.
You're all contacting me. Thank you.
We missed you a couple of shows. You were off. You took off. You were in Florida. No?
Was I?
Yeah,
No, a picture of me you could put here when I'm not here?
Yes, we'll do that. We could one of those like big head wall. Roz, first of all, thank you for coming all the way from Boulder, Colorado. That's
a pleasure.
You just got here this morning?
No, I flew in last night.
God bless you. That just to come on the show.
Just for you.
Wow.
Special.
That's very. What a great honor.
You were just special.
Do you tell everybody that? Mr. Rogers used to tell everybody they were special,
That's true.
but were they really?
You know what, Pat? You specifically are very special.
Me?
Yeah. Yes.
That could be
John,
even worse.
You too.
No,
but
I know I'm not
with you,
special,
that might
Pat.
be
Don't
better.
worry. I'm
Don't they lack special people? Don't they have institutions for special
not anymore.
people?
Yeah, we can find a place for you. That's what Florida's all about. That's what Florida's for. It's a perfect place for you to go and be very special. Nobody bothers you. You're here to talk about Italian citizenship, but your background is pretty varied. You have a medical degree, a law degree. You're a practicing lawyer.
That's it. There's no more degrees.
I mean,
There's
what the heck else?
JD and an MD is a big chunk of time. That's like
Esquire.
2 lifetimes.
Esquire.
But what do you like better? Esquire or MD? Esquire is nice, but MD's MD. I mean, you're a real doctor. I mean, a doctor's a doctor is a doctor.
Yeah, what do you go by? You go by doctor?
I go by my first name.
That's it.
Because walking around saying doctor is really boring.
Yeah.
And so I just go with my
Does it get you annoying questions? Like people, if they say doctor,
Nobody
well, I have a pain in my
Can you look at this mole on my
look
back?
at it. I don't want to bother you. I know you.
I always feel like that with my father-in-law, because my father-in-law, who is also my doctor, is an Italian. He came over when he was 12, but the neighborhood that my wife grew up in is a lot of Italians. So my father-in-law is like an Italian village doctor, and people come constantly. He's retired now, but everybody's, every
He's
ailment.
Still knocking on the door.
Yeah, he still want to know, and I do it to him too. I call him. I called him last night. The poor
Does
guy.
he miss it?
I'm sure. Doesn't anybody miss? You take a vocation, you probably miss it. Yeah, and he loved being a doctor. He was a great doctor. Is a great doctor, but retired.
That was many years ago. Now we're doing.
Did you ever wake up
something
at night and dream and say
super
PTSD
fun.
from that comes back?
No, man. You were so tired. You don't even remember those days.
Yeah.
You were so sleep deprived and starving all the time that you don't really recall vividly anyways.
I wonder if that education is just as rough now.
I'm
Well,
sure.
It's like I think law school's changed. I don't know if it's easier. I know the way things are taught have been changed. The way that the semesters are structured have been changed.
I don't really keep up. I just kind of left it behind. Check.
Yeah.
Moving on. I do have to say, though, attorneys always say law school's hard. I'm sorry, it's not.
Oh!
There you go.
Oh! Is that a little bit
Compared
of
to medical school, Pat,
Oh!
Yeah.
Excuse me.
So basically, you took
Pat.
the easy route. She's
I'm
saying.
just saying, come on.
I never had to cut open a dead body, so yes, if we're
I'm
going to go
just-
down
I'm
that
just
road,
saying.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, between the two, it was all good. But I ended up working for the Commerce Department, the patent office, and they paid for law school. So then I switched over.
God bless America.
Yeah, God bless America.
Yeah. And so that was great. And then a new chapter, right? Moving on.
So how did
But
you
it's
end up doing this?
Esquire, because I sat for the bar, right? A couple of times.
That's right.
I sat for the Maryland bar, and then I sat all over again for the Colorado bar because there's no reciprocity.
Wow.
Years and years later. But hey, it's just an exam.
So,
Right?
Roz Maiorino Esquire, how did you end up concerned with Italian citizenship? Because that's a sort of tangential journey.
Yeah, it is. I was with a firm, and we were doing lots of golden visas, and that was really interesting. The idea of being able to ascertain citizenship through investment, which kind of spun around like when everything crashed, and with the big crash kind of worldwide. And Europe was trying to get some investment back into their economy, and so the golden visa was born. And of course now it's all gutted, right? I mean, Ireland used to have one, and it's gone.
Did Ireland get rid of it?
Ireland?
I mean, I don't know the stuff.
Oh, yeah, a couple years ago. Quite recently, so just about a couple years ago.
Can you explain to everybody what a golden visa is?
Yes, I'm sorry, that's such a good question. So there was a time, and there kind of is a little bit still left on it, that if you make about $500,000 investment in property, in Portugal was really famous for it. They were a little less. There used to be 275 euros, and that's why it was so popular, because it was a lesser number to hit. And you hold that property for about 10 years, then they give you a citizenship. They put a passport in your hand. And so that was super attractive for people who were going to get a second home anyways.
Right.
Instead of getting a home in Naples, you'd go to Portugal and get one by the beach. Although there were restrictions of where you can get them and whatnot. And so it was so successful in Portugal that Spain added it and Ireland added it, trying to get some of that investment back in. But now the tides have turned. The locals are really upset because now real estate is really expensive because of all this like investment coming from outside of the country. So they've now reversed their stance on the golden visas. Quite recently, September of last year, Portugal gutted their program and made it really hard to sort of get through it. Ireland got rid of theirs completely a couple years ago, and Spain has just announced that they're going to get rid of theirs. So,
Does Malta still have one?
I was going to say,
Yeah.
Malta's holding on. Malta's a really interesting story because every other country is asking for about $500,000 investment and a 10-year wait. Malta asks for 1.4 million euros, but with a 12-month wait.
Wow.
And they put a citizenship in your hand in 1 year. Brussels is suing them
Wow.
because
Surprise!
Yeah.
they're saying
Yeah.
you're like literally selling citizenship, and that's not okay.
That's something Italy should do.
Yeah.
Italy just announced digital nomad visas quite recently this year. It was not a thing for them before, so they're just kind of coming on board on that. So it's quite exciting, but they still have never allowed citizenship through investment. You can still invest. You don't have to be a citizen. You can invest today. You just can't stay there for more than 3 months out of the year because of immigration issues. But they've never allowed this golden visa concept in Italy. Other countries were on board. But Malta is really interesting because Brussels is suing Malta because they're saying that you can't just sell citizenship because it's EU citizenship.
Right.
Like, it's not just Maltese citizenship. And Malta's comeback. Well, they're saying you have to have like connection to Malta, like Spain and Ireland, whatever. They require 10 years of holding the investment and creating connection before you can get a citizenship. But you're giving them in a 1 year. Like, what kind of connection is that? And their comeback is, well, Italy's doing it. Italy's doing it through their descendancy. And these folks with 5 or 6 generations back in the U.S. or elsewhere who have never connected to Italy are suddenly becoming Italian citizens. So if they're doing it, we can do it too. So it's interesting that Malta is using Italy as one of their defenses of allowing them to maintain their golden visa program. It's still in the courts. We don't know how it's going to fall or how it's going to get resolved. The Maltese are fighting it tooth and nail.
And as I understand it, Germany is another country where you can apply for citizenship through blood, right? You can.
Germany's tough.
Yeah.
Germany is only like, I think, 1 or 2 generations.
Probably
They're
more limited.
Just like
Yeah.
Ireland, they're very, very limited. And Germany does not allow dual citizenship, except for very small exceptions.
Oh, that's interesting.
To that. One caveat with Germany recently has been if you have a Jewish ancestry that were German and who were left because of the war,
Right.
you can get a citizenship and you can hold dual citizenship, and they're really sorry right now.
Right.
They're just kidding. They were sorry. They want you back.
Yeah, come back.
So come on
It's crazy.
back. We were just kidding.
Yeah.
So that's kind of one way, and it's funny because I get lots of calls, and some people just don't qualify through Italian side, and we go through it, and I'm always like, do you have a Jewish grandfather anyway?
It'd be helpful. in this
I'm like,
case.
do you have any Jewish background? And sometimes they say yes. I'm like, oh my God, that is like, that's it.
That's the real golden visa.
That's your golden path, right?
Yeah.
Some people so we try to dig. So anyways, that's how and then I fell into the descendancy pathway, and Italian descendancy is really complicated. It's really complicated because it can go back many generations, so the documentation itself can be daunting.
Yeah.
especially if you have anything in New York.
Yeah, it's very hard here. It's not easy.
Now, explain to everyone. I know where you're going with this,
Yeah.
just from my own experience. Explain why New York is difficult.
Because it's a 7-layer of hell. No, I'm kidding. It's
Try living here.
It's just got a lot of red tape. There's lots of regulations.
To access documents
To
that you need to prove the ancestry for someone to
the
get
vital
the Italian passport.
records in New York is hard.
Yeah.
They have a very strict rule that if you want let's say your grandfather's birth certificate, who happens to be deceased, you can only mail the document in. Well, once you mail it in, it takes them 11 weeks to open mail. And once 11 weeks is over, they need another 8 weeks to process the mail. And so there is like no sense of urgency. And even if you physically show up to these locations, they tell you it must be processed by the mail.
Wow.
So even if you stand there with an envelope and you give it to them and they say, okay, it has to go through the mailroom. And then it has to come to my desk through the mailroom. So they have very strict processes in play, and they're not willing to circumvent any of them, even if you show up in person. Another thing about New York City specifically that's frustrating is that if you, let's say your grandfather was born in New York City but passed away in upstate New York, they don't recognize New York State's death record. You then have to get, last time I checked, you guys are in the same state.
Yeah.
But then you have to request a death record. It has to be a certified death record before you can even request a birth record. So they make it, there's a lot of steps to New York vital records, especially in New York City.
And you think New Jersey's bad? See?
New Jersey is not bad.
Got
New
nothing
Jersey
on
is
New
better.
York for bureaucratic
I've done
nightmare.
Trenton. We do Trenton a lot. But no, New Jersey is better. They are willing to work with you.
And the scary thing is so many people from all different parts of the country have some ancestor here,
everybody.
right? I mean, everybody.
They all came through Ellis.
Yeah.
Everybody has something.
There's
here.
the few lucky ones who ended up through New Orleans or maybe
Boston.
like
Boston's great. We have a couple of Ohio ones. Thank you. And Pennsylvania, thank
Yeah.
you, because they went for mining or whatever.
Yeah.
But they're far
Yeah.
and few in between. Mostly, we are always dealing with New York
at least
City
somebody.
vital
Yeah,
records.
some.
We always when everyone's like, "How long is it going to take you for you?" Like the first question is, "Do you qualify?" The second question is, "How long is it going to take you for the documents?" My next question is, "What states am I working in?"
Yeah.
Right? If I hear New York, we give a longer timeline expectations. If I hear Boston, Massachusetts, it's a shorter time. Connecticut is a shorter time. Even New Jersey is a shorter time. So, the documentation retrieval really does depend on where those documents sit. And I have folks who are like, oh my God, it's so easy to get documents. Well, if they're all in Wisconsin, it is. Right?
What percentage of clients come to you with inquests about dual citizenship are actually eligible?
A good number of them.
They are.
Currently. June of 2023 was not the best time for Italian citizenship. In June of 2023, the Supreme Court of Italy reinterpreted the JS law, saying that...
JS is juris sanguis.
Yes, it's by blood.
Law by blood. Citizenship by blood.
Citizenship by blood. Right now, the way it was interpreted was that if you had somebody who naturalized, meaning they became American, so they came from Italy, they came into the United States, and they became a naturalized American citizen. If your next generation was born, you're still qualified because they were Italian at the time only, and the next child was born only to Italian parents. So you're fine. June of 2023, the Supreme Court of Italy said, if the child is under the age of 21, when the parents naturalize, you no longer qualify.
Right.
We call that the minor issue. It kind of
That's like explosive.
Yeah,
explosive.
that changes everything.
That changes. I mean,
It's
I
a
know.
huge
And
issue.
just to background
It's-
everybody, Eleanor, your partner in crime, who I regret very much couldn't be here today.
know,
She's
I
a
know.
lot of fun,
Yes.
nice person. She was the one that had told me, that kind of rang the bell when we had met at the Paisanacon conference in New Jersey, that this was coming down the line. I was stunned. I had not heard about it. And that's why I said to John, we have to get these people on ASAP. Because this is something I really want you, if you could,
Yeah,
go
no,
into,
no,
because
absolutely.
this
This
is
is
a game
important.
changer
It
for
is.
people who are waiting to get citizenship.
It is a huge game. It's a huge. So there's two things happening. There's a bunch of bills in Parliament that are trying to modify the law. Those bills They have to be voted on. Sometimes they pass, sometimes they don't pass. Those we watch and But the redefinition of law is a different story, right? Just like the Supreme Court with our abortion laws, they changed it overnight. It doesn't have to go through a bill. It doesn't have to get passed. It's just a reinterpretation of what we already know. So when they reinterpreted it, and we call it the minor issue now, right? Where you have, I would like to give an example because this minor issue is confusing for a lot of the folks who call me. So let's say your grandfather came to the United States and he was 25 years old. He came into the U.S. from Italy. And then when he was 30 years old, he had your father. Your father was born. Fantastic. And when your father was 10 years old, your grandfather decided, I need to become a U.S. citizen for job reasons, for whatever reasons. And he becomes a U.S. citizen. Now, normally you qualify because at the time of the birth of your dad, you only had Italian parents. But the new interpretation says because your father was only 10 years old at the time of naturalization, you no longer qualify. This has thrown everything into a big fizzy. Because A, that interpretation is only in litigation and has not been enforced in the consulate, or even if you apply directly in Italy. So there's three ways you can apply. You can apply into the U.S. consulate of your jurisdiction. Here would be New York, Italian consulate. Or you can litigate, saying if you have a paternal line, you could say, I can't get an appointment in New York because there's 9,000 people on a wait list, therefore I can't get in. My civil rights are violated, and I get to litigate and have a judge determine it. If you're a 1948 case, which means you have a maternal line, we could cover that too, you only have to litigate. And the third option is gaining residency in Italy and is directly applying in Italy. Now, the interpretation of the minor issue is only in the litigation pathway right now, meaning if you go through the consulate or you apply directly in Italy, that does not apply to you.
Right.
So now it's confusing as can be because half the population, like especially if you're a maternal case, you have no choice but to litigate, are now...
But explain what a maternal case is. A lot of people here won't understand.
Yeah, that's an interesting little loophole and
everything. What that
Okay.
means, maternal case.
So, females were chattel until 1948 in Italy, meaning your furniture. We didn't have any rights. And so, until January 1st of 1948, meaning that if you had children, you weren't human enough to pass your citizenship into your child. Now, Italy's really sorry. They have now realized females are not chattel. Thank you. And they have since ratified it by saying if you do have a maternal case and you're going through your mom and you were born, before she was human, 1948, we allow you to have citizenship, but you must litigate it. It has to be litigated through the courts only, and that is your only chance. So that's what we call a maternal case or a 1948 case. Those folks who have to litigate, I was just speaking to a gentleman just yesterday who called me, and it was devastating news because he did have a maternal case, which is great, but he had a minor issue. I'm like, I don't know if anyone's going to touch you right now because since June of 2023, it has been consistently been thrown out. Of these minor issues are not moving forward. And to make matters worse, Philly consulate has gone rogue because all these consulates, they have to wait for the ministry to give them direction of how are we interpreting the JS law moving forward. They're waiting for all these lawsuits that have come down the pipeline since the redefinition of JS law in 2023. Ministry is waiting to see where is it going to fall, where is the dust going to settle before they make their final decision, and directing the consulates and Italy to interpret it differently. So Philly consulate should just wait for that. But they've decided they're not going to wait for that. And they've already said, if you have a minor issue, we're going to just hold on to your application and wait for the ministry to decide what they're going to say. Philly is the only one that's doing that. No other consulate in the U.S. is currently doing that or recognizing that. So it's confusing.
Yeah.
It's ambiguous.
So
it's muddy waters.
If you've applied now what area is covered by Philly?
I can't remember that off the top of my head. You're just really
the territories
right
are
now.
yeah.
I know it's jurisdictional. It's on our website. I do have it down.
If let's say you live in Pennsylvania,
you
live
obviously
in Philadelphia,
covered. Yeah.
Can you apply somewhere else?
Oh,
Can you go to New York and
that's
say
a
I'm
really
going to put
good
my
question.
application
We get
in
that
there?
a lot. No. So the way it works in Italy, everything is jurisdictional, and they look at the location of your residency. So if you have residency in Pennsylvania, you must go to the Philly consulate. You can change your residency by maybe getting another place somewhere else, but shopping jurisdictions, I mean, they're not. Nobody can get an appointment now anywhere, right? It's hard to even ascertain an appointment, but Philly's making it hard to even move forward with a minor issue. They're putting it on hold. They're not rejecting it, but they're not moving you forward either.
You're just in limbo.
If you had to make a wager, how this is, because you're doing this a while now, right?
Yeah.
How long are you in this business, if I may ask?
4 or 5 years now.
Where do you see this going?
Not great. I don't see it moving. Look, immigration law in general, not just Italy, is fluid. Even in this country, it's always changing, and it's never for the better, right? I mean, just 2 years ago, you could get Italian citizenship through marriage by just proving that you've been married for 3 years or 2 years with a child or whatever. But then they slapped on a requirement for a language test.
Yeah.
And that's super new. And so every year that moves forward, things will change. I mean,
Is there a language test now?
there is not
For marriage.
For
There is.
marriage, that's right. So if you want to get it through marriage, you must sit for a 1B language exam, but not through descendancy.
How tough is that language?
That's my question.
You know, it's both a written and an oral exam. It's not the beginner. It's most like intermediate. So you have to, know somewhat. There are places that teach you the test, like the SAT, right? Like signing up for the bar or the barbery or whatever, where they just teach you this exam and they prepare you for it or whatnot. But you must have background in it, and you can only take it in certain locations, and they videotape your conversation and they send it back to Rome, and it has to be approved.
Madonna. What a
So
process.
that by itself is an arduously long, complicated process.
And they, as Italians always do, there's a grandfather aspect of that, because I looked into it, because my wife and daughter are Italian citizens through my wife, but we got married 2017, so I would have to take a language exam, which I probably, maybe I should take a class, because I probably would pass it, but it's a little daunting. If you're married if you're married in 1982 or earlier, you don't have
to take the test.
Yes, you don't have to take the language exam.
82. Who's married
So-
in 82?
My parents. That's about
That's
the last.
what I mean.
It's like it's very random.
It's the last generation,
Yeah,
right?
it's strange.
It's definitely pick a random number. That is exactly right. It's in the 80s. That you don't have to sit for the test. So sometimes when people call me and they look a little older on the generation, I'm like, when do you get married?
Yeah, just think. I literally been calling all my family because I'm trying to push them all through the process, and it's like, if you got married before, jump on, because
Yes.
you might as well do it now.
Yeah, but I mean, immigration law is fluid, right? It changes, and I can tell you, 98% of the folks who use the descendancy law to ascertain their citizenship are actually from Latin America.
Yeah, that's a conversation.
That's the conversation,
I had.
sure.
Yeah.
We're very interested.
We've had that conversation a couple of times, because it was brought to my attention by a colleague that one of the big issues that Italy is facing is a lot of kind of lobbying, frankly, from governments like the United States and Canada, who are saying, like, the fluidity of your law around blood and multiple generations is actually causing us a lot of concern around immigration coming from Latin America.
It is.
And, sort of, we'd appreciate if you stopped giving these passports out. I never really thought of that, right?
Nor did
Because
I.
my take was always, you want an Italian passport to go to Italy. But
No.
I never would have thought, because it
They're
isn't,
coming here.
yeah, it isn't the easiest thing in the world to immigrate here from Italy either. You know what I mean? It's easy to come here, right?
You get 3
can
months.
get it. Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing. Brazilians don't
Get 3 months, right.
They have to get visa to even
Right.
get in.
Yeah.
So the idea of holding an Italian passport will give them access to the U.S. a lot simpler than they have ever had access to it before.
Yeah.
And even the ones that go through Italy and stay in Italy, the Italians don't like them. I mean, there's no other way of saying it. They don't care for them. I don't know why they're lovely people. I'm not saying anything negative about them, but the consensus on the ground is that they feel like, they being Italians, they feel like their entire culture is being taken over by Latin America. and mostly
It's that-
Brazilians,
it's that
Argentinians.
many going
30
in?
million in Brazil are
Have an act-
qualified.
Qualified.
Or
Yeah, qualified.
qualified.
There's
Or
like
qualified.
55 million Italian people of Italian descent in Brazil. It's like the same whatever there is in Italy. There's as many I think in
Yeah,
Brazil.
you know,
Not
and
necessarily qualified for
You
citizenship.
gotta realize, like, Brazil is a second world country. It's not like U.S., right? Like, so a lot of Americans are like, oh, I'd love to have it. It's my heritage. I want to connect. I want to live there. But Brazilians do it for a completely different reason.
Sure.
Right?
Do you remember
Like,
when the Argentine peso devalued like 10, 15
Oh, yeah.
years ago? Whenever it was. I don't remember the year. But, it was a real run in Argentina. And I can remember reading articles, I don't know if it was on the internet or in the newspaper back then, but like people lining up around the consulates to just, go in and figure out if they were eligible.
Did they have in Argentina and Brazil a naturalization process for their passports?
It's interesting. They do have it, but a
Back then.
majority of the folks didn't do it. So they weren't enforcing it, or it wasn't required because, like, almost all of them qualify. But we have seen folks who had naturalized, but a majority of them, my understanding is, they did not naturalize.
I mean, that's part of America, right? It's that you become a citizen, you have the flag, right? You go through that.
Right.
I remember my father became a citizen. That's like the thing. It's like your American baptism. And we've converted you now.
Yes.
Now you're an
Yeah.
American.
Welcome.
But I don't think other countries had. In other countries, it's like getting a driver's license. It's not. It doesn't because we don't have American. You're not an American because you have a bloodline,
Right.
right?
Yeah, because you're born. But
I'm saying is, that
yeah.
I wonder, like, since we have a very, you became an American, you have all those ancestry pictures of the guy there in 1922 with the little American flag. So you could have a very clear defined, Uncle Tony became an American on such and such date, 1924. So I'm saying is, if Brazil and Argentina, they don't have those impediments because a lot of people just went there and just never bothered getting the license, never bothered getting a new nationality.
I think that's partially, the construct created by the change in immigration law in the 20s, right, 1924, and this idea that, like, that's the end of the birds of passage and these sort of umbilical routes back and forth and seasonal work and things, because at that point, it's probably why a lot of people who have ancestors earlier than that point that did, create a line here, have a citizenship, have a life here, whatever, you could go back and forth without naturalizing. Once it became an issue that you really wouldn't be able to get back in when you left, you have to be on the naturalization process, right? I mean, it becomes a far more, I would imagine, important naturalization post 1924.
A lot more strict with it as well. I mean, a lot of the Latin Americans just didn't naturalize, and it's not that hard to ascertain documentation from Latin America, and it's also not that hard to get it fixed. So
New Jersey fixed has a different meaning than the rest of the world.
That's right.
So you have to define what fixed means for you as opposed to me.
as far as documentation goes, historical documents are littered with discrepancies.
Oh, yeah.
Nobody knew their birthdays back in 1800.
Nobody
Nobody knew their birthdays.
Even my grandfather's birthday was
Nobody.
wrong.
My
My great
father
grandmother.
didn't know his birthday until he went to get his passport to come to America.
That's amazing.
Had to ask his aunt.
It's just like, there was behind the Bible or something, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't like nobody
Because
celebrated.
I was telling somebody, nobody celebrated it.
Nobody celebrated.
Nobody
Nobody
celebrated.
knew their birthdays. So it's not uncommon for us to see in historical documents as we collect them that there's random birthdays on marriage certificates and the death certificates and the birth certificates. None of them match, right? They just sort of like randomly pick a date and stuck to it. So Italy would prefer to see everything the same. So there's no question of, is this the same person? And Italians...
And Italy gets Italy. They love bureaucracy as a drug.
Yeah, but like, you also have to understand, like, Italians had like 20 kids, right? And they like recycled names.
Yeah, I was just going to say,
And so,
somebody dies, you use the name again.
It's not uncommon to be called Giuseppe like
16
times over. So when there's a huge discrepancy in age, there's a question of, is this the right Giuseppe?
Yeah.
Do you have a brother? Do you have a this? And so, they want it clear. And in Latin America, getting a historical vital record fixed is not that difficult. But in the United States,
And so
it's
just to clarify
illegal.
for our listeners, and because people ask me, I was working on somebody's genealogy the other day, if you had illiterate great-grandparents, they didn't even know how to spell their own name.
Sure.
So they're going in front of an American who speaks no Italian, and the American is going to write how it sounds to them.
Yeah.
So sometimes there was someone's documents I was looking at. There had to be 4 different spellings.
Yeah.
And they were significant.
Yeah.
I's and O's and E's, vowels being mixed up. So the reason I say that is when you say that is if someone went to, it's probably easier in South America because they spoke Romance languages.
Yeah.
Spain doesn't use the double letters. They got rid of that in the 1800s, but stuff like that. But in America, you would have, when you say fixing, you might have someone write a name one way and then write a name another.
That's right.
Or first some documents say Giuseppe and some documents say Joe
Yeah.
and some documents say Joseph.
It's crazy. My grandfather's name is Michele, but on all his legal documents till today, he's 88. It's spelled Michael, Micheal, and Michael spelled Michael. So he's not spelled in the Italian. He's not spelled in the English. It's just like phonetic. Yeah, somebody must have put on a birth certificate.
It was like French.
Yeah,
I know
idea.
someone whose personal story I don't want to reveal. And you can confirm this because you're in the business. They had one document in their Italian citizenship application where like an E became an O or an O became an E at the end of the name. And they had all supporting documents to show the consulate that this is a typo by the American in the hospital at the time. And the consulate would want nothing to do with them.
Yeah.
Would not answer their phone call. They said, you can't get it. And then certain people were able to make phone calls. And, that's how we say the word fix. You have a different version of fix.
I see.
And the person at the consulate, they knew someone, can you do us this favor? They sat down with them. And what they had to wait like 20 years for was resolved in an afternoon. But had they not known, had they not been introduced the right person to call up and say, please do me a favor and talk to this person and give them a shot, this never would have been resolved.
See, when you have to have supporting documents, that means they had other documents that could explain away this misspelling. That's not what the Italian consulates want. They want you to go and get the vital records literally fixed. Corrected, which Latin America allows. But in this country, it's fraud. You can't change a spelling on somebody's vital records who's deceased. I mean, you can't just go and say, my father is, I don't know, like Steve Jobs. I mean, you just can't, right? So that makes it, so it's a conflict of laws. It's a conflict of international laws because the majority of the folks who are applying are from Latin America. So these guys are used to seeing perfect documents.
Yeah.
That makes it really hard to explain away what is going on. And supplemental documentation is trying to explain away why this discrepancy existed versus virtually getting it fixed.
Right.
Now, consulates, as well as the clerks on the ground, as well as the judges, all have extreme discretion. So it's completely within this discretion to allow it or not allow it.
We leave room for raccomandato. I mean, that's the
Well,
lungs of Italian justice, right?
You don't want this fixed because if you have to make a phone call to get something fixed, Beppe Severino come up with this theory. That he didn't. I don't know if he came up with it, but he put it in one of his books, Ciao America. I think Italy has to be dysfunctional in a bureaucratic sense because if it didn't, you wouldn't need to have friends. It's a congenial country because everybody has a cousin who does something.
Wrong.
So you got to buy him a coffee because at the bar because you don't know. One day, they work for the Italian National Phone Company back in the landline days, and if my phone breaks, if I don't know anyone, it'll take a year. But if I call my friend whose cousin works there, it'll happen in a week.
It's not wrong. I mean,
so there's a cultural.
Yes.
We don't want to be Anglo-Saxons because we wouldn't be.
Nobody is criticizing Italy.
Yeah.
We're just pointing out
difficulty.
It's a nation that builds on difficulty. It thrives on difficulty.
Very true. Thrives on
it's
difficulty.
interesting because U.S. is such a country where you can do everything on your own. Like, we have Home Depot.
Yeah.
This is the only country that is totally normal.
That is the most brilliant words I've ever heard on this podcast.
It's like the only country that is totally okay for a layperson to be a plumber, a painter, an electrician, and here you go. There's a whole store that will help you.
DIY?
DIY. Like, this is
DIY.
DIY. Do it yourself.
Do it yourself.
And then there is other countries, Italy being among them. That is unheard of.
Because in Italy you have to be a master plumber.
Yes.
It's ridiculous. What do you mean you're going to be a plumber?
Yeah.
No, you're not a freaking plumber. You're just a regular person.
I don't disagree with the Italian model. Like, there's a very ancient wisdom to the idea that if you are not a plumber, right? Like, I try to fix things in my house, and it's good to feel. You feel great. You go, read a book, watch a YouTube video. My grandmother's famous for this, by the way. My grandmother's 80. She just turned 87, and if she can watch it on YouTube, she can do it. Like, she fixed her dryer. She disassembled and fixed her dryer by herself, right? But if you do that and you mess up, you've only overcomplicated the eventual need to hire somebody. So why not,
Just start
just
from the
wait
beginning.
wait for the master to come. I mean,
So the country is not built for do-it-yourselfers. The country is
No,
built
it's not.
for people who have coffee with the whatever, right? Like, so so the idea. So there's this mismatch, right? And I speak to folks all the time who are like, "Well, I'm going to do it on my own." I'm like, "That's awesome," and then we promote that. But there's pitfalls, and it's not really built for do-it-yourselfers mostly.
there's something I always say. Italians are really, whether they know it or not, great at being human. And there's something, as an anthropologist, right? Like the one of the first steps in a civilization is the differentiation of labor, right? We can.
Is that true?
Yeah, I mean, it's
No,
when
I know you went to school for that.
When you can finally say, like, okay, this guy can just go there and make arrowheads, and we can feed him, right? We've gathered enough food, hunted enough food. He could just be an arrowhead maker, right? Your civilization's going to explode because you differentiate the labor. You don't have to recreate inefficiencies. And I had coffee with our friend Daniela Terry, right? She does tours in Italy and stuff. She was telling me the other day about coming back from Italy and having a conversation about shopping online in some of these small towns. And they're basically saying, like, yeah, we can shop online, but, we don't trust it. We want to see it. And what about the local businesses? Like, what's going to happen without them? We have nothing to do. Nobody, like, it was this idea of supporting the collective, right? Differentiation. And again, it just comes back to this. Like, I really believe intrinsically, whether they recognize it or not, Italians really know how to be human social animals because we live with it here. If you shop online all the time, there's no stores.
As was said by a guest on this podcast, they are the world's lifestyle superpower.
Cultural superpower, yeah.
That's what they. That's what
the only one in history,
That's
really.
That's the yeah. Absolutely.
And
Don't
it's
tell the
amazing.
Greeks that, but that's,
And they're holding on to that, right?
Yeah.
Like there's nothing wrong with do-it-yourselfers, but there are some things that, like going to Italy and establishing residency on your own. Good Lord.
Yeah.
No. I mean, the red tape is legendary. And if you are going to go in Italy for indefinite amount of time and you have all the world in a time and you're going to go there for 10, 15 years, then by all means, tackle it on your own. But if you have a partner who can only be in the country for 3 months because of visa issues.
I have two questions that I came in here on my mind. The first question is, do countries allow, like Germany allows no dual citizenship?
Correct.
And to my understanding, until the 1980s, nor did the United States. That's a new development here.
Okay.
Are there countries that allow, I guess it was triple or 3 citizenships or 4 citizenships? Because I'm asking is because now as you get younger, like a lot of our listeners are Gen Z, they're really mutts. I mean, they're like
are.
Polish, Irish,
Yeah, you can apply anywhere.
Lithuanian and Italian.
U.S. allows more than 2.
So the U.S. allows more than
Yeah.
2. Does the
Yeah.
EU allow more than 2?
It depends where you are. EU is a big space, right? Like Germany has restrictions on dual citizenship. They do allow it in certain exceptions, but really they don't want it. Belgium doesn't like it. But Italy just started allowing it in 92. Spain kind of doesn't allow it, but they don't enforce it. So, it depends. It's fluid. It depends where you land, and it depends how bad you want it. It depends why you want it.
Now, let me ask you another question. And this sounds wacky, but Italy's a wacky country, so I don't think it's kind of out of the realm of possibilities. Can you see Italy retroactively rescinding citizenship now?
No,
For those
they
people
have
who
never
don't
done
qualify.
that, and it's not something it's ever mostly done in law.
So for those out there who listen,
Yes,
if they got their citizenship already, they have the passport,
in their hand,
and
they're good.
it's based on a relative who is under 21,
Mhm.
they will not be affected by this law.
That is
They're
correct.
safe.
Yeah.
It's people going forward
That's right.
who are going to be affected by this.
Yeah, they don't. Enforcing it retroactively would be a
Do-
disaster. I mean, it's too difficult to even enforce. So, moving forward, I mean, and I don't. Again, we don't know when the dust is going to settle, and when the dust settles with this litigation of the minor issue and asking the courts to clarify their stance, where they're going to fall on it. Most likely than not, they will not allow. They'll stick with the minor issue, and that's if I was a betting woman, I'd bet
That's
on
going to
it.
blow things up big time.
Well, it's also going to get rid of their backlog. I mean, having 9,000 people on a wait list in New York. I mean, why is that even
you understand, we have a lot of listeners. This is going to be very upsetting to them.
I'm sorry.
Because they put a lot of money in.
Yeah.
They put a lot of time in.
Can we take a moment and talk about that for 1 minute? So whenever someone calls us, the first question I ask them is, do you have an appointment? Where do you live? Let's say. I'm in New York. Great. Do you have an appointment with the consulate? No. The next thing out of my mouth, always, I'm sorry, we cannot help you until you secure yourself an appointment. Because there's no way that I'm going to take your money and put together an application for you that you might or might not use in 15 years.
Right.
That might or might not be
let's
valid.
go through that, because we're all kind of inside baseball with this. So for people who are totally new to this conversation, why don't you explain the fact that to get an appointment, let's say you're living in New York. Let's say you live in Brooklyn.
Yes.
What would be the process? What would be the wait time? How would you get the
Okay, so every consulate,
appointment?
first of all, you have to go to the jurisdiction of your residency. Now, on our website, I've broken down every single state and what consulate falls under what state. Like Virginia is in Washington, D.C. and Maryland. But if you're in New York, Jersey, Connecticut, you're in New York, and so on and so forth. If you live in New York and your residency is in New York, you have to go to the Italian New York consulate's website and create an account and try to ascertain an appointment for citizenship. That's the first thing you should do before anything, before you start collecting documents, before you spend a dime, before you even see if you qualify or not. Honestly, it's so difficult. That website crashes, it freezes, it does everything except produce an appointment. Now, there is a wait list for New York. Not every consulate has it. New York has it. Washington, D.C. has it. I think those are the only two. New York's wait list, last time I heard, was around 8,700 plus. So I just kind of rounded it up to 9,000. The consensus is currently they're only going through like 60 a month. So if you just do the math, that's 14 years. Okay.
So if you applied today,
if you were able to get onto the wait list today,
and it didn't crash. Now, the rumor that I've heard is we had our own vice consulate in Newark.
Okay.
And when they closed that and amalgamated us into New York, they lost all those appointments.
Yes.
So if you had been waiting for 10 years and then your appointment was Thursday.
No, it's gone.
And they closed it on Wednesday. Now you have to go to New York.
Yes.
I know a lot of people this happens to.
Sure.
Now you have to get to the end of the line. So what you're saying is if you lived in Brooklyn today and you want to say, okay, I want my Italian citizenship and I have all the paperwork and I can make this happen, if you get an appointment today, you're going to reasonably wait 14 years.
If you get on the wait list today, which is even hard to get onto, because I've heard that they're trying to close the wait list because it's just ballooning out of control. So even getting on the wait list is difficult, and you have to constantly go on the website to even get on the wait list. And the appointments are 2-3 years out. So it's not like you get an appointment for tomorrow. So my whole point to those now some consulates give appointments out within 3 months, like LA's one, and I think Philly's another. So those are hard ones.
For people who really want an Italian passport,
yes,
for whatever reason,
yeah,
should they consider getting residency in, let's say, Texas, probably consulates? I mean, I'm sure they have
Texas
one in
is also really hard to get an appointment.
Is it
There
really?
is not a single consulate in the United States that is not difficult to ascertain an appointment in. Now, Texas does not have a wait list, which I think is worse, because then you have no idea how many people are waiting and what your wait time is.
But if we're, obviously the takeaway from this episode for people out there who are in process or want, like, get online now before you spend money,
Don't
right? Get the
spend
appointment,
any money.
right? This is all up in the air. But when we were introduced to your partner, Eleanor, right? I think it was at your feast I met her. We talked about an alternative model that you guys are utilizing.
I mean,
right? You're called bespoke Italian citizenship for a reason. Can we talk about that? Like, what's the process? Because it's not hopeless.
No, there are so there's 3 pathways. Your local consulate is the first option.
Let's assume right now that's on hold.
That's on hold.
Right.
So
may not
be.
The
second option is if you've tried for months, 6 months plus, to ascertain an appointment, and you cannot. Now you have to take screenshots to prove you've tried. Then you can litigate, saying your civil rights are violated, and an attorney who's licensed in Italy, we don't do that, I'm only licensed in the U.S., we have litigators we work with, can then represent your case in a court of law. That's not recommended for people with minor issues, right?
Right.
I mean, that's just not.
Right.
So that's not a good space
Give
for
up
you
a
right
creek
now.
right now.
This is not a good situation. There is a third option.
This is where bespoke comes in.
Well, we actually do all three.
But no, I know you do all three, but
we
like
also,
this is the most bespoke option.
This is like the most
built for you.
customized, built for
customized.
you. So we do help ascertain residency in Italy. We only work in northern Italy, where our process. The nice thing about working in Italy is that the clerks in Italy are willing to have a dialogue, versus the clerks at the consulate is like a black hole. You can't walk in, you can't speak to anyone until your appointment time, and then you don't know what you're going to get. You might get that guy who cares about the E and the O, and that's
Right.
it. That's the end of your story, and there's no going around him. But with the clerks in Italy, you can walk into the comune, and we take a photocopy of all of your documents. We have our colleague walk it over on your behest. It's first come, first serve. You don't need an appointment. You sit there for 5-6 hours, and then they call you in, and they do a full review. And if there's a discrepancy in E and O, birthday, whatever that they're not happy with, they let us know, and we get all that fixed, or try to fix or provide supplemental information. Then we go back and say, okay, we know we had this issue. This is the supplemental information that we can help support explain it. And if it's a yes, that's when we talk about you going to Italy. And if it's a no, we actually tell the client, I'm sorry, we couldn't help you, actually give money back. Because, we're about citizenship. We're not just getting you documents, for God's sake, for you to fan yourself with. Right? This is about citizenship.
Right.
So that kind of helps solidify that your documents are good. Now, we can't guarantee anything because I'm not giving citizenship out. Like, we've spoken to the clerk, comes from the horse's mouth, and then we ask you to fly to Italy. You can establish residency. You need two things. You need a long-term rental, and you need a police check. It's a very Italian thing. The police officers actually physically walk into the apartment and make sure that you are and you're living in a livable apartment. And once that is established, you're a resident, and the minute you're a resident, your jurisdiction is there, and therefore you can turn your documents into the clerk. Now remember, we just checked all your documents with that clerk, so we know that's gravy. And then 3 to 4 months later, you get your citizenship.
3 to 4 months.
Yes. Now, that is locational based.
Right. Is that why you only work in the north? It was like 7, 18 years in the south?
The south can be 8 months to 12 months. But it's still under the year. Like, it's still like somewhere between 6 to 12 months, depending. There's 8,000 communes in Italy, and there's lots of places you can do this. But somewhere between, for us, it's around 3 to 4 months. Have I seen it go past? No. Can it? Yes. There's no guarantees. We don't guarantee anything.
Sure.
Sicily's known for a little slower, like around 8 months, 6 to 8, something like that.
It's better than waiting 14 years to get an appointment for 3 years out, right? I mean,
right. So that's
God willing,
sort of
you're still alive.
That's the other option.
Yeah. So let me ask you, and we're going to wrap after this question.
Can I have this couple questions?
Well, no, we're at 53 minutes because he doesn't edit that much down. We got to get like an hour. That's the best we could. An hour and 5. You want to ask one more after me?
I got two big questions.
All right, let me get this last one.
Go from your question.
Yeah. So the question that I got to ask is, and obviously those who watch our show know we talk all the time about 87% of Italian Americans have heritage in the South. You guys, in particular, don't work in the South. Could I go in as a son of the South? Right, I have ancestors in 4 southern regions. I can't apply in the northern town.
Yes, you can.
I just have to become a resident.
Yeah, it's a very common question.
It's
you just have to establish residency. Usually, where you have to file your litigation is usually in the town of your ancestors, but not if you establish residency. So you're conflating those two.
So when they look at my records to show I have Italian heritage, doesn't matter where in Italy I have it. That
if
town
qualifies. If
qualifies
you do the residency program,
if I do residency,
it doesn't matter.
Okay, that's
but
interesting.
But if you do litigation, it does matter.
That's wild. So you basically, you can have all this documentation, right? You can sit online for 14 years to get an appointment for 3 years out, or you can go to court, or you can take a 4-month vacation in a beautiful northern town. And I mean, that sounds pretty appealing.
It can be less than 4 months, but yeah.
But I mean,
Yeah, I mean, it does. To establish residency is not 4 months. To establish residence, by law, Italian police have 45 days to check you. So the max it can be is 45 days.
That's amazing.
And then you can have freedom of movement. Sometimes it's 10 days. Sometimes it's 20 days. Sometimes it's less than that. Right, because it's whenever they choose to.
So that is the ultimate Italian loophole, basically.
That's the ultimate Italian.
That you have left variants and variables for every single possible. I mean, because 8 million towns up north, right? It's just really, this is the ultimate Italian law.
Yeah, so there is a path around it, and so not everybody can give us that time though in Italy.
Right. Yeah, sure. Of course.
Not everybody is flexible enough with their work or their life to be able to give us that, and there's also cost.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no question that the consulate would be the most cost-effective way to go. It's right down the street or whatever, just a flight away, wherever you are. But then Italy, the flight to Italy, then there's rent, utilities, this, that, right? It adds up.
But I know a million Italian families who used to, spend the summers and have lost their citizenship. It's been cut off, and everybody complains about
the people don't. How many?
Right.
I mean, not to drop any names. How many people I know, born and raised in Italy, became a citizen here? Didn't when Italy had the small window to reopen? I guess it was '94. They could get your citizenship back. Born and raised in Italy, and Italy will not recognize them as a citizen.
And maybe own property there and still go there. So
sure.
it's like, okay, you own a property.
Because they became an American.
Right.
And that,
But so this summer, instead of going to your small town in the south, get a long-term rental in a small town in the north, it's probably not a huge additional cost in some of these small communities. So, I mean,
Right.
go ahead.
Let me ask you two questions. First question I want to ask you is, do you see any other landmines coming besides this minor issue?
The minor issues, that's what keeps me up at night because it's already in the works and it's a reinterpretation of the law, so it doesn't have to go through any parliament voting. The consensus on the ground is that the language exam will be coming.
So then you're going to have to that's going to weed a lot of people out.
Yeah.
So you're going to have to then...
I think the consensus on the ground is not if the language test is coming for the descendancy, but when.
So that's going to take a lot of time bureaucratically because people are going to have to grade it. And so if you're online now, because there's a lot of our listeners who are online for New York or for Boston for their appointment.
Or have their appointment and are waiting for their appointment. Yeah.
Right. If they're waiting for the appointment, is it possible that the language exam and or the minor issue could happen? And so when they go for the appointment, they're going to say, I'm sorry. So they're going to say, oh, shucks, this is big.
This happened with the New York thing when they closed it. The people lost their...
It's the same mentality. So someone who's going to get an appointment next year might show up at their appointments for 2025, right? They might show up in June of 2025 and they say, I'm sorry, as per the 21 age law, you don't qualify.
Yeah, there's a line in the sand with any law implementation, and they say from this day forth, we shall implement...
The reason I want to clarify that is we have listeners who feel, now that I have an appointment...
I'm safe.
No,
I'm safe.
That's a completely
Nothing
false
is safe.
sense.
Welcome to Italy.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
You want to know what it's like to be an Italian
Yes,
citizen?
You're not.
Yeah,
not
exactly,
until
yeah.
not until you have that citizenship
All
at
right.
hand.
Yeah,
That's my
passport.
first question. My second question, you're a doctor, physician doctor. You're a lawyer.
Yes.
Why in the world did you start this 4 years ago?
I really thought, again, we discussed the whole golden visa. I found the idea to be fascinating.
But you were interested in this. It wasn't
I
just
was
like
no.
You fell into it. You have to make a decision.
Yeah, no.
I mean, were you just reading The Economist and heard about golden visa? I'm going to start a company with citizenship.
It was with a firm, and they were doing it, and I thought it was really interesting.
So you were working for someone doing this, and then you
yes.
kind of went off on your own.
Yes, correct. Yes.
And then it morphed from the golden visa to the desanguinis.
Yes. Yeah, and they were also doing descendancy as well. It wasn't just the golden visas. They were just providing this alternative citizenship all of them, not anything in the EU, and even they were even doing the Caribbeans, and it was a little all over the place. It was drinking from a fire hydrant, just figuring out this law and that law and that requirement. But yeah, I mean, it was just really interesting, and of course the backlog that happened with the pandemic, with all the consulates here, we felt like bringing a solution to a problem, because this is what's all about.
Now, you're in Maiorino. Are you eligible? Where's your family from in Italy?
In Naples.
In Naples.
She's
Yeah.
in trouble, but you can't. We're too far in the interview to
Oh, 'cause
beat
she-
me up now.
You wanted
She
to
doesn't know where
give
she's
us.
from. How are you in this
here we go.
business?
So you're not.
You don't- I
so
mean,
you don't have.
she's
the-
like,
you don't have a
"Am I
passport.
free?"
No, it's true. I
Do you
have,
have-
yes.
you
yes,
have your passport?
Yes. It's Naples. I know we covered
It's a
it.
city in Naples,
It's Amalfi.
but it's
Not the
definitely
coast,
Amalfi.
but that there's Amalfi.
There's a
and that's
city of
where the
Amalfi, sure,
Yes, there's
sure.
a city, not like where everybody
Sure, I was
holidays
just with them on Sunday. They had the feast for St. Andrew Avellino. So
That's
I
true.
your
Yeah,
people
no,
are in
it's a
New
city,
Haven.
yes.
But what other place are you from?
They're Naples. You're killing me.
Yeah, you're
I
in
feel
trouble.
Like, I feel like I'm sweating.
But where else?
now.
You're both parents.
You're under the
You
hotline
should be.
with Pat.
You should be. You're in the naughty corner now. But
I
where's
am
your
POB
mother's side
citizenship
from?
test.
She's not fully Italian. She's only partially Italian, and I didn't explore it because that I
You
just
should.
needed
Why do extra
paperwork.
work?
But you got to go. But they're your people. That's
Right.
your sand. That's your dirt. That's your bloodlines there.
I feel
We'll
like
find
I'm,
it for
I'm
you.
getting spanked right now.
He
by
told you
Pat.
this is
Yeah,
East
you're gonna get
Germany.
spanked,
He-
absolutely.
I'm getting
That's the
spanked.
price. So you
This
came
is
on the
no
show.
Irish coming. I don't like
No,
that.
you got.
This is Irish.
You got.
This is
No, no,
Irish. I don't. Pat, we were
Yeah.
friends.
But now we
No,
don't have to be
you know
friends.
what?
I probably won't see you
No
again
more.
after this. But
Oh,
you got a nice.
back to
We got a good
the line.
infomercial here, and now this is your takeaway because this isn't coming for free. We got to find out where you're from, all the places, and you got to go there.
I'm gonna go to all.
You got to walk through those streets and say, when Jesus Christ was in grammar school, my ancestors walked these.
It's true.
When my
It's true, it's beautiful.
when Moses was up there getting those tablets, my ancestors were. I mean, go to a town like
No,
Matera.
it's like when
10,000 years old.
I didn't know my grandfather was born in Campania, outside Salerno, and that's all we knew, and we couldn't find anything further. And eventually, through a friend of ours that Pat set up, we found my great grandfather had been from Basilicata, and I always went to Italy. I went to all these towns. I have family there on both sides. So even then, having known all this stuff, it was just like another wonderful bite at the apple to find a whole new town and all new people. And people shared our surname, and one guy owns a Terali factory. It's my cousins, and they made such a fuss. But it's a gift. Every little town you find is another gift.
To a guy in Argentina, I found out in 1630-ish, 1600s, I had an ancestor from Sant'Angelo a Fasanella. And that is now on my Pat to-do list to go there.
I love it.
I want to see that place.
Where
right?
is that?
It's in the Cilento, San Teodoro Serramazzano.
Now,
It's somebody
Pat
there from
is like
1730s.
the whitest Italian.
He looks Irish.
Yeah, sure.
You
I'm
look-
so inbred on my father's side. I'm lucky I ain't got. My grandparents are second cousins 9 different ways. All my aunts and uncles and all my grandparents' siblings all married second cousins.
But your brother Anthony looks Italian.
I like how
No, he looks more
you
like
were
my
okay
father.
with
He looks
it.
more Irish too.
He's got more hair. Yeah, he looks more like my brother looks more like them.
In
I mean,
his
we both look
in his
like
eyes,
him.
I always see more of an Italian look.
His hair, he's more like.
Yeah.
You can't be when you're so inbred. I'm like a thoroughbred. There's no way.
He's pure.
But let's say something. On my,
pure.
listen, on my Italian side, I have 8,000
Yeah.
genealogical names. My Irish side, right? My old man's off the boat. I got like 5 because I'm a Lynn 3 times over. My names are repeat. But it's the same family. It's like, we have the same
No,
name.
no.
We all live in the
It's not
same bog.
Smith.
So that's why there ain't no way I could not look Irish.
Yeah, that's so funny. Well,
But you
Pat,
are
you're
where
gonna
your
walk-
mother is. We're going to go there. I want to
Yeah.
find out. See, I'm annoying, but you're going to appreciate
you're
it.
gonna like it at the end.
You're going to be
People
in
love his-
Sicily or
his-
wherever you're
yeah,
from.
his genealogy
And I'll say,
services.
wow.
Yeah.
Lou Mendola, right? We see a Phoenician wall. I'm like,
Yeah.
this is a 7,000-year-old wall. Like, what were these people thinking when the guy who built this wall? It was like 7. I mean, Lou's going to correct. Lou will send us a message
Yeah,
in
yeah.
2 seconds. But there's a Phoenician wall in Palermo. Like, what was in that guy? Like, I'm touching that piece of stone.
Yeah.
That this Phoenician, he's a Phoenician.
Yeah.
He's not a Sicilian. He's not a Roman. He's not a Greek. He's a Phoenician, speaking Phoenician, with writing in Phoenician. And I'm like, and that's what I trip out on.
Yeah.
Right? To go to Paestum, right? And think to myself, wow, we were like right over the hill there. Like, were my ancestors in the Angora here, right?
Yeah.
To go to Pompeii
Yeah.
and think like all these places. My grandma's house in Piana di Sorrento. Where they used to get the water, they found pottery 14,000 years old. They were getting water there. The Fontana, they were getting water 14,000 years ago. That's why when I find it, and that's why I keep going, because I'm a sick person, that's what we do.
Yeah,
and
no,
when
but-
I go back and I'm like, I want to walk around that wall, right?
Yeah.
Like, how were you in, like the Tajano earthquake, the Basilicata earthquake of 1857? Like, what were my ancestors thinking when that hit?
Yeah.
What did they think? My first ancestors see a tomato when the Columbian Exchange comes. Like, what did they say? What did they think?
Yeah, it's amazing to think about. It really.
That's
is.
why I geek out and go back and back and back and back and
Somebody
back
took
and-
me when we were in Sicily when I was with Dolores into one of these like ancient Siculai tribe cave dwellings. These like conical. And there's only like 4 of them left on the island. This one was actually secret because the government will come in and take it over. So I got to go into this it was like the womb of Sicilian culture, and it was one of the most amazingly transformative experiences. So
I'm gonna say the last thing.
he's not wrong.
Because I'm gonna be putting.
It's a joy to go back.
John going over. I found out on the 200th birthday, my grandmother's great grandmother was an orphan, and I found her birth certificate on her 200th birthday. It spooked me out because it was like, and I had a big question on my grandmother's side. So long for a family who didn't talk and stuff, and I found out that orphan was the second wife of my grandmother's great grandfather. And there's 2 families, one that comes from the first wife and one that comes from the second wife, because the first wife died. And it opened up, and I said to myself, but I read the birth certificate, and it says, it said that the mayor writes on the birth certificate, this baby of a few hours old.
Wow.
Right? And I think, I really don't know who left her.
Yeah.
How did those, I mean, I guess that's like now, it's like my great, I have to numerically sit down. So there's a couple that had that baby. Who were they? I'll never know. Right?
Yeah.
And there's no way, unless DNA, I don't know how DNA can figure it out.
Gives it to you.
But I'll never know who they were. Like, were they a couple, right? Did she get pregnant in an unwanted way, right? Was it a servant-maid relationship? So that's the kind of stuff. But that, you gave us the genealogy, and now we're going to get you...
No, but I want to take one more...
anthropology.
I know, just add one more thing. So you brought up the orphan thing, which I get a lot of that. So a lot of folks who call us, they're like, oh, my great-grandfather was an orphan. I guess that's that. I'm like, that's why. No. We can get you through.
Yeah.
Even if the person was an orphan, we can still find their birth certificate. So a lot of folks who sort of have their ancestry sort of hidden orphan line, they think that, oh, well, it's an orphan, we'll never find documents.
Yeah.
That's actually not correct.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of
So
mythology
that's-
on that.
And who's good at
I do wanna
documents?
clarify.
Everybody who
that.
says
Yes.
oh, my name is Esposito, so who I knew a person's name was Della Piazza. They said that means we have you have roots. They're there.
That's
There's
right. They're
documentation.
there. They're
do the due diligence.
do it.
Those I've looked at those orphan birth certificates. They're detailed.
Yeah.
No,
They're very
again,
detailed.
we don't need a lot. We just need to prove that they're born in Italy and they're of Italian descent, and as long
And a
as
human
we
with
can get,
rights, yeah.
That's a human with rights, and we just, as long as we can get their birth certificates, we're good. But we get a lot of, oh, well, I can't go through this line because it was an orphan and it'll be hard to get documents. That's a myth.
Yeah, let a professional tell you what line you can go through.
Please,
That's
please.
like
That's
the
a myth.
plumbing,
I
right?
do- that's
let
right, like
the
the
professional do their job. That's the takeaway.
Is that how we're wrapping up?
Of this
Because I know
episode.
he's like,
Yeah.
hey, so we got to wrap up
Yep.
now. Got to wrap up.
And
Because
I'm
they
a
had to get the
professional
cameras.
moderator,
They had to get
and
the
here we
cameras.
go.
When we
I'm
were
gonna
nice,
moderate
like
out
a
of our-
radio,
Yep.
we never had these problems, and now I got the East German.
This is a whole
I
new.
got. Yeah,
he hates the screen.
I
he
hate
hates
this
the
stupid
cameras.
thing.
But he loves all of you out there.
I
So
do.
This is
I do.
Pat's service message here. This is a public service announcement. It's not to discourage you from the application process or seeking out dual citizenship and your roots and your genealogy. It's just to say, do it in a way that brings some wherewithal and some awareness, and like the plumbing in your house, a professional
and move because the laws are changing.
and fast.
If you're gonna,
and, yeah,
if you're gonna do it, right? Time is.
Time is
we
always
say
of
as
essence.
attorneys, we say time is of the essence.
It always is.
Time
is of the essence.
That's right.
So we are going to link on our show page, Bespoke Italian Citizenship. This is an option for you. Reach out to Roz, reach out to the team. Like we keep saying, go to the professionals, get yourself help, be fast, and be diligent, because it is, for so many reasons, worth knowing where you came from and where you're going. And where you're going could be a whole different place for you and your future family if you have your Italian citizenship back. So we hope you've enjoyed. We hope you've taken something from this. Thanks for listening and watching, and we'll see you next week.